Hmm. How long do you think this has been here?
I don't know.
Do you think like 50 years?
It's been here as long as I can remember.
Do you think that makes it permanent?
I guess so.
Does that make it a permanent pasture?
Wish we can ask somebody.
What makes a pasture? A perma-pasture. What does that system entail? How do you do it? If only there was somebody we could ask. My next guest is like a renaissance man of homesteading. I have a bunch of his videos saved to my watch later that I've already watched. But when I come across something I need advice on, or something on the homestead, I pull them up. In this episode of our Flannel Forum, please welcome our next guest from Permapasture Farm, Billy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our Flannel Forum. Today we have Billy from Permapastures. Billy, like me, was a city kid, and that's probably as far as our similarities go. He went to college for a short while before joining the Army to become an airborne sapper. After your service, you became an electrician. You completed degrees in biology and business administration, moonlighted as a part-time radio talk host, which is amazing, and you learned how to butcher. And then you got smitten with permaculture, it sounds like. You got a degree in design, designed homesteads apparently all over the place, and a permaculture orchard with chickens on an active construction site. That sounds like an awesome story. You also started your YouTube channel in 2019. You currently have, I think it's 31,500 subscribers, give or take, and 1.65 million views. That's you're like the Renaissance man of homesteading.
Well, it's good to be with you, bro. Thanks so much for having me, Brian. I probably ought to reach out to you every time I want to know my stats because you know more about it than I do. I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh, so that's how many we have now?
That's
okay. I thought we were at 30,000.
It was a good night for you. It jumped up.
I'll be dang. Yeah, here as of late, I don't know why, I don't know what for, but as of late, we've been taking on, I think, 1,000 to 1,200 a day new subscribers. Maybe they just discovered the content. I'm guessing maybe YouTube might have taken the governor off. I suspect. I mean, I've been told that sort of thing happens. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where it goes.
I actually found
go ahead, buddy.
From your pig butchering video, which I haven't checked it lately, so I don't have the accurate stats. But about a year ago, when we were looking into purchasing our property, it had at the time I think 180 or 190,000 views, and your intro hooked me when I saw you doing all the stuff that we want to attempt doing with the bees and the chickens and the compost and butchering your own animals. So
oh man, I love it. It's amazing how many people have reached out because of that video. It was our most popular video, I think, until this other one that we just put out the other day. My goodness, man, I just never. It's always the videos you don't expect that are going to get the most traction. Things that I would have thought, honestly, that butchery video, the whole hog butchery, from a homestead perspective, I thought that thing would have done well. But it's amazing that it was like months later after we did it that people started to catch on and realized, man, this stuff is easy. It is accessible. Maybe not easy all the time, but it can be learned.
There's a difference between complicated and hard, right? So picking up a car by yourself is hard, but it's not complicated. Changing an engine in a car is complicated, but so anyways. So homesteading.
It's hard for me. Yeah.
How long have you been homesteading? That was one of the stats that wasn't on there.
It's really hard to say because truthfully, I can't even tell you for sure. I can tell you where there was a demarcation point and I really became serious about it was 2008. I mean, the only jobs that, at the time I was working as a talk radio host and as a journeyman electrician all at the same time. And when the bottom fell out of things, my goodness, that was when I realized that whole year was the hardest year of my life for a whole variety of reasons. But it was that year that made me say, okay, it was to a certain extent, I guess I felt what it was like for some of the people that lived through the Great Depression, where it was so indelible on their lives that every person that went through that somehow, some way changed their lives. permanently. And no matter how well they did, no matter how much money they had, they always lived in a very, very frugal way, I guess, with the understanding that bottom could fall out anytime. And that's exactly what happened to me, because the only job I could find was in third world countries, whether it was in Afghanistan or at that time, Haiti, where there was some collapse. There was no jobs to be found. And then I told myself right then and there, if I ever get out of this, I will never, ever be wondering where the food's going to come from and how we're going to pay the bills. So my wife had been really serious about homesteading long before I got into it, introduced me to Joel Salatin.
Yep.
I jumped on board. She was already into it long before then, but I got into it then, didn't have any idea that I would love it, that it would become the passion. You know, I end my videos with permaculture is my passion. And in the past, I was known as the Permaculture Pimp Daddy. Of course, that was an acronym. And yeah, I would have never, what I thought started out as a preparedness type thing, that's where it all began. And then the gateway drug into permaculture, when I discovered that, there was no turning back. I mean, to me, it's been that way ever since. Sorry for the long-winded answer to a very short question.
No, it's so, I mean, there's an undercurrent now, I think. And I also had a similar experience in '08 where you drive by a restaurant and wonder if you'll ever be able to afford to eat in one again, type feeling. And if somebody would just give you a chance to do something, but at the time, if you didn't have certs or didn't have qualifications that people were looking for, stuff that a lot of us were qualified for just disappeared. So, and you're right, it is a lot like the Great Depression. We swore we'd never be house poor again. Even if you didn't know you were house poor at the time, you found out real quick that you could, and there were forces beyond your control. Even if you made all the right moves, which I'm not saying we did, but you could make all the right decisions and still end up, flat on your back or on the street or whatever. So yeah, I think it was a wake up call.
I don't know. Brian, in my case, I don't know. I mean, we were never those types of people that wanted to keep up with the Joneses or anything like that.
Right.
But there were tactical mistakes that we had made. And it was only the crucible of really hard times that we're able, I guess, as the saying goes, the days of darkness made us see the light. And then so many changes. And of course, it wasn't overnight. It was gradual. And then as you make a little bit more when you're able. This is a war we don't win in miles, you win it in inches. And I think too many of us forget that. And especially right now where everybody's hot for, sorry about that.
That's okay. I joked that you were going to tell too much truth, and so they cut us off.
No, well, that's the consequences of living out here in the bush.
Well, so yeah, we're in the climate we're in, where everything is almost too hot, I think. So the crypto spikes overnight, so everybody wants to be crypto. Real estate is flying off the handle.
Oh, goodness.
So unlike, I think, potentially our fathers and even grandfathers, who there was a slow progression to wealth building. You worked your job, you had the factory job, whatever job you had, and you put 10% into your Roth IRA or your retirement, and you bought a reasonable house and you lived in it for 30 years, and everything got slowly more valuable. And I know, at least in our lifetime, at least twice, if not 4 times, you could have done all the right things, invested your 10%, bought a reasonable house, within your budget, and market forces way beyond our control can just smack down everything. We had people's retirements in '08 that have been saving their entire lives. 40-50% of it was gone overnight.
Well, that goes to show you that, honestly, the entire paradigm's changed. Yeah. All the wonderful advice that so many parents, probably yours, mine certainly, thought, go get a good job, get that watch after 30 years, retire into the sunset. That has long passed. And so many people don't yet realize that the entire paradigm has changed. And now everybody thinks, and I think they've thought, certainly my generation for the longest time now, it wants today what it took their parents a lifetime to achieve.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing it in the homestead world where, man, I can't begin to tell you all the correspondence I get from people, wanting, like, I got to get started right now. They see that we're on a knife's edge regarding the economy and all these things, and they're wanting overnight to put all these different things together. Like, I want pigs, I want sheep, I want cow, I want chickens, I want all of this, and I want a garden to boot. And they don't realize that to get to this point, that goes right back to what we said a moment ago, that it has to be done in inches, not miles, or you will get burned out. You will have colossal failures. Even if everything goes right, you will have colossal failures. Like, we've been doing this a while, and I just lost a pig to an inexplicable accident the other day, broke a femur falling off the side of the mountain. Even if you do everything right and you do it with all the best of intentions, with all the right training, you're still going to have colossal failures. But it's going to be, your failures will be on steroids if you think overnight you're just going to put it all together. Whether it's regarding the economy, whether it's for, Bitcoin, as you mentioned a moment ago, which I'm invested to a small extent, but I'm certainly don't have the bank in it. Everybody's looking for this get rich overnight, homestead overnight. There's been even some festivals as of late that have marketed themselves as, and I quote, learn to homestead in a weekend, which is not a very wise thing to be telling people. But yeah, we're a curry in a hurry society, and this stuff doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah,
it shouldn't anyway.
You can read, Joe Salatin has generations worth of wisdom. You mentioned him earlier, and you can read every book where he's disseminated the information down to you in a few pages. But disseminated information, and we were talking just before we started filming, how you were out, doing something with your pigs real quick that was kind of unexpected, and I had birds escape as I was trying to move my little chicken tractors around. So, you can make schedules and plans and have the knowledge that you think you need, but then when the rubber meets the road, it's a whole different experience.
Amen to that, brother. I mean, every time you turn around, it's something like that. So, but that's the nature of this lifestyle. And that's the thing that only experience can teach you, that no matter, you may be planning out to go A, B, C, and D. And then, you got a bull that escapes, you got pigs that got out, you got chickens that died, you got things, and you're going to have to know and realize that every single day, there's going to be something that jumps off that you didn't expect. And that's just the nature of it.
And in part, I think that's what makes it so appealing, at least to people like us, is that you don't know what's going to happen today. Going to a 9-to-5 office or even a trade, where you have to, I'm going to go install 14 air conditioners today. I'm going to go to the office and file 85, T111 reports, or I'm going to, with this type of thing. And sometimes it's incredibly frustrating because you have a timeline for things, but at the same time, just when something has to be done, it has to be done. So you just go take care of it. And that spontaneity of it is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it could be frustrating for the wrong personalities too, but yeah.
It's for type A types, but not too controlling, I think.
Yeah. Perfectly stated.
So speaking of starting off in homesteading, so somebody's watching or maybe, typing out the email right now with their list of things that they need to get started with. What are the top 5 things for someone who is maybe not yet bought land, or just bought land, or is looking to buy land and wants to jump into this lifestyle? 5 things. I mean, there's probably 100,000 things, but top 5 to look out for, be careful for, start with.
Oh, sure, man. At the end of the day, I think it always starts with mindset. Ask yourself. Now, I know you want 5 things, but it's going to be tough to pigeonhole some of those things, but I'll just go, let me kind of fire away this way. Before you even do this, now I'm going to look at everything through a permaculture lens, okay? So I might tell you a little bit differently than most. Before you even buy that land, you want to make sure, just like in the permaculture manual, and a lot of people forget this part, that the first thing you do is it's considered the prime directive in permaculture, is that at that moment, you have got to take full, complete, total responsibility for yourself and your family. That is one of the things in permaculture that is so most overlooked. So first, you have to mentally get that into your head and say, okay, am I willing to do that? Okay, so now you're thinking about land. Before you even do that, I would do a property assessment. And there's a permaculture way of doing that where, there's some debate as to whether or not you look at your water first or whether you look at access. I'm one of those people that says, okay, do you even have access to that property? If not, how do you get there? Because really the water is insignificant if you don't yet have access to it. Do you have easement issues? There are all those things. And then ask yourself, how much property do you really need? Because honestly, there are examples. In fact, one family in California where it was on 1/3 of an acre. There was a guy, a dad, and his 3 kids. and they had to sell probably 6,000 pounds of groceries of things they couldn't eat every year. So do you need 100 acres? Probably not. Maybe if it's a starter property, see what you can do on an acre, because I guarantee you with the right methods and right techniques that an acre could be far more productive and beneficial than 10 acres if you're using it properly. Do you have the means to do it? Like here at my farm, it's not just me, it's my son and my wife. My son, you know, he's very able-bodied. I mean, instead of sending him off to college like so many do, we sent him off to the Earthship Academy. We sent him off to work with Joel Salatin. He worked in Australia with Jeff Lawton. You know, my wife goes off. So we poured all of the knowledge, what we thought was useful knowledge, into him. So anything he had so we send him out as our emissary to go get more knowledge, come back and cross-train us, or maybe I go somewhere. So yeah, a landscape assessment. Do you have access? Do you have all those things? How much land do you really need? Do you feel like you need a starter property before you kick off to something that's bigger? Because I mean, do you have any idea how many people out there get out there, man, I just got 100 acres, I'm off and running, and then they have some serious buyer's remorse and then also, is your spouse, if you have one, are they on board? Because there is such a thing as a permaculture divorce. If you go into this with one of you kicking or scratching into it, I promise you it will be a living hell. The spouse that went along kicking and screaming is not at all going to be digging it. So that's where I'd start. I mean, ask critical questions of yourself and your family, and how much land do you really need, and also the extent to which they're willing to be involved. For all of us, I mean, it's our passion. It's not just me, it's all of us. We're all permaculture designers. We're all, I wake up, can't wait to get out of bed to do this again, and I go to sleep doing the very same thing. And that's not where your head's at. And if you're getting into it because you're afraid of some calamity that goes off in Russia or Ukraine, or if you're getting into it because, oh my goodness, the whole thing is going to fall apart, that may not be your best notion either. Because I remember back when so many people were getting on board I started off in the preparedness movement. And it was astonishing to me that every time there was a certain type of president in the White House, you'd see people come in. They had this level of desperation. And then when the other party would take over, then they would fall off. Then it would, it'd be this yin and yang. And then you would find out who was in it for the long haul or because they love this lifestyle, and also the ones that were in it because of fear. So if fear is driving you, let me give you another alternative. If you're getting into this lifestyle as a means of preparedness, then don't do it for that reason. Go out there, buy yourself some storable food, and maybe chill out where you are. Because if you think you're going to get into this and it's just going to be business as normal, and you're getting into it for all the wrong reasons, you will have colossal disappointment, and you're going to be out a lot of money. I've seen too many of those people. I've even partnered with too many of those people. They jump off, and then there you are left holding the bag. So do not do that. I don't know if that's actually the way you wanted that question to go. No, that's really the best answer I have.
It is, because I've actually said something similar on my channel. You don't have to do homesteading the way I'm doing it, or exactly the way you're doing it, or the way you can do it the way you like to do it. But if you're doing it because you think that you're just going to make your own food, which we're doing it for food security, we also love it, but that's our main focus. And I think there are different focuses in homesteading. If you want to focus on, raising pigs, raise pigs. If you want to focus on dairy, you can focus. You don't have to do everything everyone is doing. But if you think that it's a whole lot cheaper to buy freeze-dried food for 25 years and stick it in your closet, and buy a couple filtered straws and some infrared vision goggles and call it a day, than it is to try and buy a piece of property. Just the time alone invested in raising animals and tending, your crops and stuff is unbelievable compared to the return if you want to break it into financial segments. So you can make a lot more money doing other things, buy your storable food and your, your bomb shelter and everything else you need, and still have a regular normal life, and know that in the back of your head, if the electric grid goes down, you've got 800 gallons of propane in the backyard, and you're good, and your frozen food and everything. than it is to try and raise all your food from scratch.
I keep seeing this over and over and over again, this same phenomenon. And then, you know, Danny, I remember from Deep South Homestead, he had said, and I didn't really look at it this way until he said it. He said, you know, homesteading as of late has really become something of a fad. It really has.
Yeah.
Preparedness, when I was into it, first off, was a fad. It really was. Guys would get out there. They loved, you know, hanging out with other guys with their guns and the trucks and all that. And then the women had their little niche thing that they thought was really cool. And then, you know, all of a sudden, every one of them fell off. They weren't into it for the long haul. Now, if you want, I would suggest to your viewers out there that if you want to try the gateway drug into this, so many people say, well, chickens are the gateway drug to permaculture. I disagree. I think it's gardening. I always ask when somebody wants advice on moving to a new property, the natural question for me is, well, what are you currently doing on the property you have? Because no matter where you are, you can look at people like, you know, very, very well-achieved permaculture designer by the name of Eric Sider. The guy turned his balcony into a rainforest practically, and he was in an apartment. So if you haven't already done something in the place where you are, it's like that old saying that if you're not happy with what you have, you're not going to be happy with more. So if you didn't show enough gumption to do whatever you could in the place you are, do you think you're going to put foot to butt when you get out on 100 acres? I would really stop and ask yourself, okay, that could be your training ground. If you want more property, do what you can in the area you have. And then when you feel like you've outgrown it, or you feel like, hey, I'm ready to, you know, go to the majors, then stick it out. But that's always the first question. What have you done where you are? Don't tell me you can't do anything. When I'm saying people living in apartments on balconies, even the dude even had a pond out there, for crying out loud. Had water plants in there, had fish swimming around, and it was a tiny balcony growing. You know, he couldn't eat the sweet potatoes he was growing, but he was eating the slips off. I mean, eating the greens that came off of it. So there are numerous things that you could do. Get good in the place you are, then jump off to something else.
That's because homesteading is like business building in some ways. You don't go rent out a Walmart size structure to open your, you know, curio station with your knickknacks. You start in your kitchen, you start in your living room, you start with your, you know, in the area you're at, and maybe then you print business cards, and maybe then you get a vinyl sticker, and you work your way up. And as you cannot meet the demand anymore in your space, you move up. It's funny you mentioned a balcony. When we lost our house back in 2008, we ended up moving to an apartment, and we were on the second story of a less than desirable location. And we had tomato plants that were 6 feet tall, and we hung a swing from the balcony above for my daughter, and we had a little sandbox, and, like, you know, we were trying to mix the garden with, you know, her little only playground that we trusted her to be on because of the area we were in. But we moved from that to a small house. It was 0.17 acres with the house, and we outgardened and outgrew that with kids. And then we moved to 0.3 acres and outgrew that. And then we made the big leap to this place. But each time, it's exactly what you said. We were doing as much, and we were in cities, so as much as you could legally do as well with animals and trying to learn. We almost put a pig in the city. But we like our neighbors, so we didn't do that. But you're exactly right, and you just keep going. And so when we moved out here, we moved in a position of you never know what's going to happen when you move, and especially when you try and upscale things. But you have an idea of, at least we know we can make these things work. So if we can make those work, then maybe we can either make it a little bigger. You can add another thing. You can slowly grow. Actually, I think I'm wearing under my flannel Sean's Modern Yeoman, slowly.
I had it on yesterday, man. That's exactly. I wear that shirt a lot, man, because it says it all. It really does.
And I have a feeling you're a wide open kind of guy like I am. So, like, the thought of waking up in the morning with nothing to do is like a disaster. That's a terrible day. I don't think of, like, sitting in the hammock with a lemonade is my idea of relaxation. You know, we want to be out and be about it, but you can get ahead of yourself sometimes. Not you, me, can get ahead of myself trying to jump too far too fast. So he helps me remember to take a breath.
You know, that's been a real problem with this lifestyle. And that's another thing people don't consider is until recently, I've never taken a day off. I mean, I never take a day off until let's say in the last month. For, you know, I make no bones about the fact that I'm a blood bought Christian.
Amen.
And there was some parts that I was neglecting. You know, even my son, I think he was a little frustrated one day and said, "Dad, even God took a day off." So even though I wake up every single day and I love what I do, there's a point where you can do too much, and then you start finding yourself in positions where you're doing foolish things. Or guess what? I'm not doing when I'm not taking a break. I'm not coming up with the next best idea. Sorry about that. That was a pig in the distance making a bunch of noise.
I love it. Currently, this is no joke. Speaking of things going wrong, we have our well being drilled as we talk. So if there's a dull rumble in the background, that's them putting in my deep well.
I get it. I get it, man. That's the nature of doing an interview on the front porch. But, you know, the wife's inside doing some business stuff. And so I'm taking whatever area I can. Plus, it's a beautiful day.
It is.
But yeah, you got to take that time to rest. And I think even though I spend every single day doing what I think I was put on this planet to do, there is a point where you do too much and you don't even realize it because you're like, okay, I'm going to take a break. And I did. I took a break. And then lo and behold, man, I'm thinking about some things that maybe I didn't think about before. Think about some more things. And then you realize that, oh my goodness, man, I'm getting to the point where I look forward to this one day a week where I basically take off for 24 hours and I recharge and then I come out better. So many people told me, because I wasn't quiet about me doing this. And then people on YouTube were saying, you're going to find out that you do more in 6 days than you do in 7. And I'm finding out that is true. That is really true. And I feel more recharged. When I take that day off, I get into the word. I do what I think I'm supposed to do. I pray. And all those things charge you, not only spiritually, but physically. I really believe that. So
absolutely. 6 days a man shall work, and on the 7th he shall rest.
Amen to that. But I've been neglecting that part of it for the longest time. And then now that I'm honoring that part, I feel like so many things are moving forward in many different ways. And I was like, well, wow. I kept making excuses like, well, I kind of love what I'm doing. So am I really working? And at the end of the day, yes, you are.
Yeah.
So to those out there that feel like, you know, I understand the things that are going on in this world right now. And I know you feel like you got to get loose or get lost. I understand all those things, but you've got to take that time where you reflect, you think, you ask yourself, am I going in the right direction? Am I stalled? Should I just stop everything and just, you know, pivot to another way? You know, you don't do those things unless you take that time off. So remember, take that time, breathe, think, pray, recharge.
Well, and even, you know, I mean, scripture tells us that the land is to lie fallow, and you as a permaculture expert know about not over farming and not overthink. Those things were taught to us, you know, many years ago by the one who created the whole system to begin with and created it to be good. And when the children of Israel didn't pay attention for 490 years, he said, well, we're going to let it lie fallow for 70. So to catch up and do all the things that they were supposed to do. And why would we be any different as part of the creation, you know, and part of what he has done? We're not going to outthink it or outsmart it. This life is best when you work with the systems that are in place, you know, and take advantage of the things that are already there. And like you said, resting, well, while it might be hard, is one of those things. And resting doesn't mean, you know, if your pigs need food, you don't feed your animals or those kind of things. But there are sometimes on a Sunday afternoon after church or whatever, we will, you know, take the golf cart down and just sit and watch the animals and just enjoy being out on the land. And you might grab an egg, you might throw some food, but that's not, you know, I don't think that's the work that we're talking. You're not going to plan butchering a pig on a Sunday type thing or on the day that you have chosen. So there's, you know, you still wash your dishes and eat your food and do those kind of things, but you know, it doesn't mean you go into a seance and hum in the corner for 24 hours. There's still things to be done, but it's that mind rest, the soul rest, and the focus on today. We're going to focus on the Lord. We're going to focus on family, and we'll take care of the things that have to be done, but it's not another day to add a thing to do.
Right on, bro. I could not have said it any better myself.
So what are some man, I got so many questions for you. I could do this all day, but it is a beautiful day, and I know there's stuff we want to do. What are some must-read books for people who are sitting in the apartment or sitting in the thing, and they've watched every YouTube channel they can think of, and they're building toward that thing someday in the future, what would be something you think they should have?
Oh, good night, man. I can fill volumes with what I think you should start with, but let me break it down in a different way, because when you get off and doing this lifestyle, of course, I'm always going to lead people back to permaculture in one way or another, because it encompasses, even though Bill Mollison was not a Christian at all, he still, whether he knew it or not, still basically took that Christian ethic and put it in there in many different ways, even in terms of rest. Now, in terms of books, and I know YouTube is a wonderful, wonderful resource to learn so many different things, but let me get anybody who's thinking about this lifestyle, you want to get into it, I would encourage you, first of all, find out what you're interested in. Because if all you want to do, and there's so many people, like I said, the gateway to all this, I think, is gardening. It's not chickens per se. I would start with something like Gaia's Garden. It's accessible. It's, maybe the title isn't my favorite thing in the world, but honestly, when you get down in there from a permaculture standpoint, it's going to lead you in the most easy way possible about why you plant this tree the way you do. What nitrogen fixture should you put out around there? Is there a guild of plants that really works well for your area? And it even gives you a resource in that book on a different, let's say you put a guild, or basically like the fingers of your hand. Imagine your thumb, let's say, being a tree. Well, do I want comfrey there? Do I want a blueberry? Do I want a nitrogen fixing shrub? What ground cover do I want? Do I want something that's vining? In some way, do I want to emulate all 7 layers of a forest in there? And I always point people to that book, because I know there are those out there that have so many problems with it. But for me, I think it is an honest, instead of jumping into it for a permaculture design course, read Gaia's Garden. And I think it is the best way to get people into this and not make as many mistakes in terms of using perennial systems and tree and nut and fruit crops, That is always my go-to. And I know people get shocked when I say, hey, start with Gaia's Garden. Mark Shepard's book, Regenerative or Restoration Agriculture. It's basically, I would start with Gaia's Garden and get into Mark Shepard's book. Also, the One Cow Revolution book by, I can't think of their names right now. They escape me. But I would definitely get into that, where one book, I think, builds onto the other, then the other, then the other. Akiva Silver's books, Joel Salatin's books, you can't go wrong with that. But depending on where you want to start, since I think gardening, and because I'm a permaculture designer, I'm always going to point people back to regenerative systems and systems that are perennial. Does it always have to be annual crops? No, it doesn't. There are lots of awesome perennial systems out there that you can incorporate into your food forest, into your orchard. That's exactly what we do. So we've taken, with all the resources that we have, YouTube is great, but like within our orchard that I'm out here looking at right now, there's the influence of so many people in there, all from their books and their information they've provided. There's Mark Shepard out there, if you look at it. There's Elaine Ingham. There's some of David the Good out there, whom I think you know very well.
Yeah, he sounds familiar. I think he's got a channel, right?
Yeah, he might be, but there's all these people's influences where we've cut and pasted for our design, and I wouldn't have been able to do it had I not had a really good understanding of how they do it. Stefan Subkowiak, he's out there. I can probably name off the top of my head at least 7 people who have all had a hand in how we design and how we put these things together, where we didn't just take one person's method. We've taken what we thought were the best methods of all these wonderful designers and teachers, and put them into a system that works well for us. But it all started from Gaia's Garden. It all started from there, getting that understanding and then adding more to it. Then adding, Mark Shepard, you know what, man, I really like the way he does his stun method, strategic total utter neglect. How do we incorporate that into Gaia's Garden? How do we take his stuff and put it into the guy that did the wood chip gardening? His name escapes me right now. But how do we take all these people and take the best of what they offer, put it into a system? And you know what? It gives me the greatest joy when I do these YouTube videos to point people back to all these other people that inspired us. And that's where it started. Guy's Garden. Gain that knowledge, get a little bit more. Workshops that you're able to go to, YouTube videos. And it's gotten to the point now where I struggle to cite all the wonderful people that inspired what we do. And it drives me crazy when I can't do it, because it's become something of a hodgepodge in my brain where I don't know where David the Good left off and where Mark Shepard picked up. So I tried. That's why when I do these videos, I tell them, okay, check this person out, check this person out, check this person out. And I don't even know where all of it came from. But there are so many wonderful sources out there. Once again, brother, I'm not sure that I answered this question in the way you'd like.
It's good.
But yeah, start there.
The only thing I would add to that, I think, is for those, I mean, obviously people are watching on YouTube and the internet and everything else, is we know, and not to give in to a spirit of fear, but things are fragile and we don't have very many redundant systems. So while you can store, the knowledge of the world on a small device, if you can't access it, it's no good. So I would highly recommend buying paper copies of everything that you think might have any knowledge or value whatsoever. Because and fire can burn and destroy, it's no guarantee, but it's a lot more resilient to have it in more than one format.
And let's not forget your mind. There was a guy that once wrote, money can be lost or stolen. Beauty fades, but what we put in our minds is ours forever. And so there's a fair component of this that, yeah, I can read this book and I don't have a photographic mind, but when I love what I'm looking into, I generally remember a lot of this stuff. That's another thing, is there are things that I cannot convey in a YouTube video. There are things that I cannot convey in any other way than in that book. So there are people that say, oh my goodness, I don't like to read. Well, you better get loose or get lost, bro. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have these sources in an area where so many things are on a knife's edge, or at least we're told they are, if you don't have that ability to pick up that hard copy, then you're going to be in a real bind if things do go sideways. Because you want to be able, it helps when you've read this book and you put it to work, because now it's in my mind. And now it's pretty hard to lose it after I put these on it. It's pretty hard to lose it. But you better have it as reference material, if nothing else. But you cannot beat. There was another guy that once wrote also regarding books, that a book is less important for what it says than for what it makes you think. And books also create dreams and visions and ideas for those who have not themselves seen. So they're wonderful in so many. I don't mean to get so philosophical on these things, but I love books. And frankly, I don't get a chance. I love to read so much, but these days, especially when spring's beckoning, I don't get as much chance to read as much as I'd like. But yes, books, get them, hold on to them, treat them. Once upon a time in America and even the world, having books were a sign of wealth.
Yeah,
they really were. So when Ben Franklin came up with a public library, that's how revolutionary it was. They didn't have access to books in the way that we do now. Sorry, brother, I don't mean to get so philosophical on this, but
no, I really appreciate it.
From the top of my head, I could probably fill volumes.
What I want to convey to people is what you're doing, is the thought process behind, and you hit on it with the fear. Why are you homesteading? What are you doing it for? And there's a myriad of reasons and everybody has their own, but it's the philosophy behind it. And if everybody in your family isn't on board with the philosophy, it's not going to work. But that's true of anything, right? If you pick business, if you pick working out, if you pick investment, there's philosophy that goes into those things, the belief and the core that make up the behavior and the actions. Those are after effects of what you believe and what your belief is based on, your worldview. So yeah, absolutely. If we weren't getting philosophical, there wouldn't be a point to do it. And
well, it gives me joy to be in an interview with a person that you can do it with. So it's a joy to speak to you, Brian.
When you're out in the field by yourself with nothing but your thoughts, you think a lot. So
yeah,
the chickens talk back, but they don't make much sense. So I do have a question about animals. Do you breed your own, or do you buy, bacon seeds, as it were, or, chicken nugget seeds?
Fantastic question, especially in this age. Now, it depends on the animal, of course. Right now, we're doing so much in terms of infrastructure that we kind of got a hold on a lot of things. Now we got food systems in place. That was the first thing we did. I mean, we've been something of nomads for years now. We'd find a place, build it up, move on, find a place. We've done this in I don't even know how many different states at this point, and done it in so many different ways. So until we found our forever home, we've never gotten to the point where we are right now. But on this place, because it was basically played out by the previous homesteaders that were here. As a side note, I'll get to your question, but I will say that if you do it right, homesteading can be very rewarding. But there is a whole lot of decimated land out there for people that were homesteaders because they didn't understand management. Okay, so that brings me into your question. Okay, so we graze our animals in accordance to a high density grazing model, so we don't play anything out. Right now, the bull's in there a little bit longer than we want him to be because we got to build him a new structure, and we're going to get him into a new area and get him some friends also. But right now, he's in a holding pattern. When it comes to chickens, yes, many times we do a model with our chickens, and I wish the whole world knew about it. It's called the chicken tractor on steroids. It was basically adapted by a guy named Carl Hammer at Vermont Compost by Jeff Lawton, who, you know, world famous Jeff Lawton, permaculture designer and educator. He took this model, basically made a video, and I don't know of anybody else on this planet that has tested it more than us. We've done this thing with layers. We've done it with meat birds. We've done it with birds that we've hatched. That's getting to your question. We've hatched them out, and we've raised them for meat. We've raised them for eggs. We've done this chicken tractor in every way imaginable. And all along the way, we've hatched our own birds within this system, seeing, okay, does it work this way? Does it work this way? The only way in which we haven't tested it is when it comes to Cornish cross typical meat birds. We haven't done it that way. But every other kind of bird you can think of, whether it's a dual purpose, whether it's strictly a layer, we've raised them in a brooder, we've hatched them out, and we've done that. Regarding pigs or sheep, no, we've gotten feeder pigs and feeder sheep. Now, we have given some thought concerning pigs. Okay, do we want a farrow? Do we want to go through that? And yes, we're going to get there after we get other things done on this property, meaning that we need a mini barn for these cows, and to be able to do that, basically move the barn from where it is, move it to a new spot. At the same time, over to my left, we're in the process of setting it up to build an earth ship for my son and his future wife. So that's an adventure. So basically, regarding animals, we're in a holding pattern by and large. We're still putting meat in the freezer. I got basically 7 pigs up on the side of this mountain right now. Lost one recently. We're still putting meat in the freezer. We're still doing all those things, but we're in a holding pattern. We have all of our freezers full right now, and that's good. It gives us some running room. So now we can kind of take a step back and just kind of keep the pigs going through the landscape, keep the cows going through the landscape, keep the chickens going through the landscape, but not adding anything more to it until we get off and running on this earth ship. So basically, we're in a holding pattern, but the only thing we're really breeding right now as of late are just chickens.
We've talked about it briefly on the channel, but something I didn't understand about this lifestyle, and it's one of those things that reading all the books in the world, until you start doing it, you don't realize certain things. You know, I come from a construction background, and if you have a broken house, as you fix each room, it's fixed. You don't have to do anything else with it. It's done. You move on to the next thing. And so I rushed out, here, and we went from, 10 birds up to 45. Now we have 100. We added the pigs and the hot wire and built shelters, and then you move on to your garden area. But each time I added chickens, it took a little bit more of my day just to maintain what I had. And then we had the pigs. And even though there was this big process to get the pigs there that isn't there now, the ground is, the wire's up, their shelter's built, but I still have to go out there every day, feed them, water them, check on them, make sure they're good. And each little thing just takes up a little more of your day, so that you don't have that big chunk of time like you did when you first started to go, hey, we need to go build a barn. No problem. I have 3 days in a row. We'll go. Well, the pigs knocked their water over, so now I have to go get their water. I have to refill, and the chickens, one got out, so you got to go chase the chicken down. So your time just kind of shrinks down. So it's hard to add something else when you already know I only got 6 hours left in any given day, barring catastrophe, right? That's That's assuming your truck doesn't go bad, or the water heater doesn't explode, or any of the other things that go with life don't happen. Your day gets more and more concentrated in your free time. So you mentioned freezers. If the apocalypse were to happen tomorrow and Mad Max was running around and the whole grid collapsed and all the stuff that everybody's been worried about since the beginning of time, except when they didn't have any of these things that we have come so heavily to rely on, how prepared are you, I guess? How well would you guys do? And I don't mean maintaining your current standard of living, because that would not exist, obviously. But, would you starve to death in 6 months or 10 years? Like, what's the...
That is really a very timely question, and the one I get asked most often, mostly through emails and things of that nature. Are you able to hear me? It looks like the wind picked up a little bit.
You got real quiet.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, so if things were to jump off, because permaculture, there's a lot of things we do here, and we basically say permaculture, homesteading, and preparedness, and each one is reliant on the other. So nothing's done in a vacuum. And as I recently kind of revealed in one of my most recent videos, is that, hey, it's been embedded, not witting, but unwittingly in every video. There's always a preparedness quotient.
Mm-hmm.
Now, getting back to your question. Now, if things were to go sideways, you're thinking, okay, yeah, you got freezers and stuff like that. But at the same time, I also have a freeze dryer. At the same time, I also have a pressure canner. At the same time, we got a water bath canner. And so whenever we have an abundance of harvest, before it's been, okay, we got to can it. But now that we have this freeze dryer, my goodness. Now, not everybody's going to have the ability to go out and spend, it is quite an investment to do a freeze dryer. But honestly, it takes so much work out of your hands, because a canner, pressure canning, and all these things require a great deal of attention. So getting back to what you're saying. Okay, so we take a piece of our harvest, the ones that we can't eat immediately, and I'll put it this way, that freeze dryer is running nonstop, bro. Whether it's animals we processed, let's say they graduate to the fridge, because you can't put it all in the freeze dryer at once. So you may take it out. Let's say it's ground beef. Well, you maybe take it out, cook it up, freeze dry it. Let's say you just got a bumper crop of radishes. Okay, well, I don't know how many people are going to eat a bunch of canned radishes, but they kind of work pretty good in the freeze dryer. So maybe you go that way with it. Or maybe you got a bunch of carrots. It's kind of cool in that it creates options for you. Okay, do I want to freeze it? Do I want to can it? Do I want to freeze dry it? So we have those options. So we put those things back, and we put a fair amount of it back. Now, for operational security reasons, I'm not going to tell you how much or where.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we take those things and we put them back. But if anybody needs to get off and running tomorrow, and I know that there's a lot of desperation out there, brother. I mean, I'm going to say, if anybody needs to get off and running tomorrow, well, you may not, and let's say you're doing it on a budget. Okay, well, does it make sense for you to get a lot of freeze-dried goods? Probably not, especially if you're doing it on a budget, because that stuff ain't cheap. Does it make sense for you to go buy a freeze dryer? Probably not. So at the end of the day, what I recommend to most people, if you need to get off and running tomorrow, get yourself beans and rice. You can go down to any Sam's Club probably right now, buy a 50-pound bag of white rice that will keep forever and a day under the right conditions for about $17. There's a place I found in South Carolina, not far from me, where you can get 100-pound sacks of grade A beans. I didn't even know they divided beans into grade A and B and so on and so forth. You can go out there and get those for a 100-pound bag for probably 50 cents a pound, even less. So there are so many different options. Get your dry goods like they would have done in these mountains from way back. I have the benefit of knowing Justin from Metcalf Mills, who literally lives down the road from me. And he's lived in this mountain for 8 generations. Find out what the natives are doing in your area. And you find out that all through the Depression, that these mountain people up here barely knew what was happening. Why? Because they lived all their lives through dry goods. They had a little bit of a hard time finding coffee and sugar and things like that, which to them were luxuries.
Right.
But they made sure they had beans and bullets at the end of the day. So yeah, we have our dry goods in place. We have them stored properly. but also when we get our harvest, we make sure that we take a fair amount of it and we put it back, not knowing, no, this isn't for some reason, it's been people that decide to prepare have been demonized in our curry in a hurry society. I know why, I know the reasons why. And somehow if you're able to add ER to anything, you can demonize it and marginalize it. Prepper, birther, truther, add ER to anything you want to demonize, and then the American public will buy right onto it. So I never call myself a prepper. I call myself, I'm into preparedness. I like to prepare, but I never add ER to it because somehow that's been made a pejorative in our modern society. But yeah, we are well prepared with water, food, heat.
If you say you're into
need.
Food security, people are like, oh yeah, food security, wonderful. If you say prepper, they go, well, where's your tinfoil hat, you know?
Exactly. And it's been made that way. Just add ER to whatever you want to marginalize or demonize, and the American public will go right after it.
Oh, what a world. So let's switch gears into YouTube, because it's you and I had talked on the phone previously, but it's kind of a strange thing, because you called it what'd you call it, get loose and get lost. We call it going to the weeds or going to the tall grass, where it's time to just kind of hunker down and be less visible. And yet, here we are throwing out stuff, to the world, when most people who are, especially those things that start with P and end in ER, don't like anybody to know anything about what they're doing, because of operational security. I mean, that's really what it is. So how in the world did you get into YouTube?
Kicking and scratching, bro. I made for a time there, I was a talk show host in Kansas City on the biggest talk station there, and gave that up for a whole variety of reasons, not the least of which being them telling me what I can and couldn't say. And good night. That is a story unto itself. That being said, I relegated myself to anonymity, and I really liked being, just hidden for a while there. And so many people were saying, man, I want to know how to do this. I want to know, how do I get into this? And so my son kind of suggested that maybe we ought to do a YouTube channel, but we had been doing it for years, long before then. With the benefit of hindsight, I now wish that maybe we would have recorded all these awesome, cool things that we did in the past, because I don't have them now. But essentially for me, I kind of got into it thinking, okay, it's kind of a record of the things we're doing in our progression. But at the same time, it was also a way to convey this information. And I got pretty comfortable with my anonymity, and I wasn't sure I wanted to get out of it. But reluctantly, I got into it. I said, okay, felt pretty rusty after, not having been in the public eye. And when you do radio, nobody sees you. So you're self-conscious about that. But you're a different person entirely when nobody can see you on the other side. So I was like, okay, if you look at some of the earlier videos, man, it was like watching paint dry. And then slowly but surely you get into your rhythm, and then you get into you can't just be out there saying, okay, here's how it goes. There has to be an entertainment quotient to all of this. And I'm not sure I got that down yet, but I really do feel comfortable in my own skin in front of a camera now in ways that I never did before. And YouTube was basically for me as a way of hanging on and finding, because for some reason in my family, we never take pictures. Mm-hmm. I have to have my mother-in-law threaten us because we never take pictures. I don't know why. We just never think about it. It's just not a concern. But I had wished, man, I wish I had taken some pictures of all these awesome things that we've done over the years. And YouTube was a way of collecting all that information. Mm-hmm. And then as it grew, I'm realizing people are benefiting from the information. And as it grew a little bit more, I'm realizing, okay, are there some problems in the YouTube world, in the farming world, in the gardening world, in the orchard world? Are there problems that we solve that are unique to how we do it? And yes, there were. So guess what? Business opportunities presented themselves. So it was like one built on the other, and then on the other, and then on the other. And then I realized in so many different ways that we're solving problems and creating businesses that I didn't even know were possible. I was like, okay, I'm kind of cool with retiring and going into the sunset, not doing electric work anymore. But I had no idea that it was going to open up where we could create business opportunities that frankly are too good, because once people buy this stuff from us, they're not really repeat customers. This stuff works. What we do works so well that we don't have. So yeah, there are some holes in our game, but yes, YouTube started out as a way to collect this information, then slowly but surely began a business and doing things that were unique that not everybody out there is doing. So that's kind of where we are. I'm not sure I answered your question adequately, but yeah, that's how we got into the YouTube space.
No, you did. I mean, to distill it, it was basically to keep a record of what you're doing, and that has morphed into, a whole different thing. So I guess then you didn't have, your expectations weren't, I'm going to start a YouTube channel and then I'll be on a yacht later, and then I'll come back and film my little bit and go back to. So what were your expectations when you started it? Was it just to document and that was it, and it evolved from there?
Well, I knew also that we were doing things that other YouTube channels, I'd seen a few others, and I knew that we were doing unique things that nobody had ever done before. I knew that for years, we had already been doing the chicken tractor on steroids. And then when, money got tight for so many people, I'm realizing this is the answer to our protein problem in this world. This is the answer to that. For people that can't go out and buy compost, this is the answer to that, because honestly, the compost you make at your property is going to be better than anything you can buy if it's done properly. And the reason why is like the microbes that are indigenous to your place are not going to be the same microbes where that compost was produced, let's say 10 hours away from you. Right. It's like taking an Eskimo and dropping him off at Panama, or taking a Panamanian and dropping him off in Alaska. You're doing the same thing with the microbes. So I'm thinking, okay, within this chicken tractor on steroid system, man, there's nobody else doing it but us. Wow, you're producing a cubic yard and a half of compost per week, fattening up your meat birds, fattening up your layers, putting all these different things that are all brought to bear within this system, and nobody else is doing it. And at the time we started, I was doing 2 different chicken tractors, 33 birds a piece in each one. And I'm like, good night, man. This can change for all those people that have more time than money. This is paradigm changing, because you no longer have to go down to the feed store and go get your stuff. You're producing all the compost you need for your gardens. You're doing all these things. And I thought, okay, man, if the whole world knew about this, good night. I think everybody and their great grandmother would jump off. Well, it didn't pan out that way. People by and large, until recent days, until things started becoming expensive, weren't really all that interested in that system. And I thought, this YouTube could really showcase that system. Everybody's going to want to know about this. And that's not the way it went down. So here with a 2-year lag, people are starting now to catch on, realizing, oh my goodness, these feed costs are getting away from me. I need different ways to feed these birds. I need to be able to do it with the byproduct of the things I grow. I need to be able to do it with food scraps that I could find from maybe restaurants in town that are willing to work with me. That's where this YouTube thing I thought would kick off. That's where I thought the chicken tractor on steroids, not to mention how we do very unique things, raising pigs literally on the sides of mountains.
Right.
Thought that would be interesting.
I saw
it's
your
always
one
the
video,
things I'm finding out.
The 30, I think you said it was 30 cents a pound that it was costing you to raise your pigs, which is, that's pre-inflation, of course. So it's probably at least 35 cents a pound now, but.
Well, let me put in a caveat of also with A, me doing the butchering, and B, me feeding all these pigs. Now that's fine. The only thing I really got into these pigs is the initial purchase price. I got zero money, and people think I'm not telling the truth. In fact, in that video, I wasn't really honest about it, because the real truth is it was below 20 cents a pound. But I thought people are going to think I'm lying about this if I don't inflate the cost of what it costs. It wasn't, I think it was 31 cents a pound. It was really more like below 20 cents a pound when you get down to brass tacks. And also that's with me doing the butchery,
right?
Because I am also a butcher. I was trained, by former Michelin star chefs. So I had really good training, very fortunate training, very blessed training. So that's with me doing the butchery and me not feeding them store-bought food. And it was below 20 cents a pound. And it's honestly inflation proof, just like you mentioned a moment ago. So people, I hope they're not really, I'm seeing a little bit of movement as far as people getting involved with the chicken tractor on steroids. People just haven't yet realized that you can raise your pigs almost the same way and raise them for next to nothing and get better pork than you could ever dream of buying.
And one of the problems with being a visionary who's loving what they're doing is it's hard to, you know, vision cast to other people when you stumble upon something or even deliberately, you know, make something and it works, right? And you are totally vested in the system because you have experimented, you've worked, you've tweaked, and now that you have this package and you just want to give it to somebody, it's almost like, you know, if you make something by hand and give it to somebody at Christmas and they unwrap it and they're like, oh, great, thanks. And they put it on their shelf with everything else. And you're like, don't you understand? I spent weeks on this, you know, in your case, years building, you know, tweaking the system and building on this thing and making this thing for you. And all you have to do is, you know, put this here, and this here, and you're done. You don't even have to. But part of the reason you love it so much is because you are that vested in that system. And I think that's the way it is with our properties and our gardens and the homesteading, is if you don't have all those years vested into loving it and building on it, it's going to be a flash in the pan, you know, a fad, as you've said. So I love it. I have watched some of the videos on the chicken tractor on steroids. We're still so new to our property that we have so many systems to build, and that's something else too. Plants don't grow overnight. Systems don't happen overnight. You know, there's things you can do to get started, but you know, you have to have the mindset that this might take me 2 or 3 years before I start to get the microbes back in the soil that need to be here that weren't here, and the brush cleared out over there, and the biochar made, and you can spin your head around, you know, trying to make all these things happen at once, but you have to be long game. You have to think 10, 15 years down the road. Me and my wife were walking through the other day talking about different trees that we want to plant, and she likes live oaks, so we're going to throw a live oak in and see if we can make it live, and some hickory trees and some, you know, whatever kind of nut trees and fruit trees. And every year I want to add more producing trees. And we've even said specifically that it might be the grandkids that are the ones harvesting this food, but that's okay. That's, you know, it's the best time to plant was the ancient Chinese proverb. I think the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. Second best time is right now. So that mindset of long-term and the investment in the systems. So, and that the compost thing is huge, you know, because it is so good for everything, and microbes don't grow overnight, and you can add all the chemicals into your soil that your plants need, but that's not a permanent system. That's just, you know, throwing a Band-Aid on it for that year, and you don't bring any of the microbes in. And microbes, they're alive and they have a life cycle, and it takes them time to reproduce and all those things. So you can get that quick result, you know, flash in the pan garden, and it's green and it produces and it's amazing with chemicals, but you're not going to have the longevity that comes with putting the time into the place.
Well, that was really the frustration for me, Brian, with having created these systems. I thought, because by and large with the chicken tractor on steroids, we've adapted it 180 degrees from where it initially started with Jeff Lawton. And I'm sure he would absolutely approve of it. Foolishly, I expected that if I made a system that was plug and play, where I figured out just about every problem and issue you could possibly have with it, maybe it works with this material, maybe it works with this material. And foolishly, I thought that everybody would want to do this. This could solve our food problems. And I will say that I did it with the greatest degree of altruism that I could imagine. But what I didn't account for is that we know the price of everything and the value of nothing at the end of the day. And I think we've become so accustomed to being so accustomed to going down to your local feed store and finding everything you do, everything you need, getting it at a, let's call it a reasonable price, even with modest inflation, that we haven't suffered enough to make us want to do a system like this. And now, with a crucible of really hard times, and they're only going to get harder by every metric I can see, is now all of a sudden people are doing this. I was hoping they would get on board. I saw what we have, what we're going through a mile off, and I'm sure you did too. And so for years, I wasn't doing this system for that. I just knew that it was coming, and I thought it was a really neat way to get off and running. And I thought with this plug and play system, everybody or the great grandmother would get onto it. Well, it didn't happen, but now they are. But sadly, it's happening at a point where it's going to be harder for you to be off and running, because I was hoping you'd get the bugs worked out long before it became of real consequence. So, you know, we're getting there, and sadly, I think more people are going to jump into this system as a means of out of desperation instead of out of doing it because it's just a pretty awesome system and a way to live. But even if you can't, I even made provisions for, let's say you're an old timer and you have limited mobility. I mean, I thought of every single scenario in which this thing could work, and I thought it would change the world if more people would adopt it. So foolishly on my end, I thought this system would change the world, and maybe it might. But I think it's just going to take a little more hardship for people to recognize how sublime a system like this truly and really is, and how accessible it is.
Well, let me give you a little encouragement, because that's what I like to do. I know you're similar, but how many people's lives do you have to change before it's worth it?
Well, that's really profound. Honestly, there have been quite a few so far. So the answer is one, you know, and that is sufficient.
It's unfortunate when you have something for people that is good for them and good for everything around them that they don't pick it up. But all you can do is present, and the ones that do, I mean, you end up with strangers sending you emails, you know, because of some of the stuff you've done. So
that is a very profound point. So I'm looking at this in a different way, thanks to you. Very wise words.
Speaking of emails, that meat grinder that you recommended should be here this week. So that was our first contact, was after that butchering video. I said, "What meat grinder do you use?" You told me, and when I sold a kidney, I went and bought it. So.
Oh my goodness, it's not cheap, and it's more expensive now. But I will promise you that honestly, a good meat grinder. If you're going to go down there, for anybody, I know it's not really what we're talking about, but just as a side note, spend the money, because honestly, if you go get a 3/4 horse, or let's say you're processing a pig and you just have a half horse off the shelf grinder, it is going to take you forever and a day. Even when it comes to sausage making, spend the money, get a good grinder. You'll be glad you did it.
Yeah, there are ways you can do things that are inexpensive, but like you said, if you have more time than money and you want to stand out there with a butcher knife and chop it into little dicey pieces and stuff it by hand, go for it. But if you have a little bit more to do, so yeah, tools, I mean, anything with homesteading, it's a tool for some purpose. And even things in our kitchen, my wife and I have had this conversation with appliances even, it's a tool that you use every day. So while expense doesn't necessarily equate to, like you said, value, the ones that are worth buying are worth buying, because cheap is cheap. It always has been, and it always will be. So it doesn't have to have fancy LED lights that, you know, send a Bluetooth message to your phone when your sausage is done being made. But, you know, all metal grinding gears and things like that, those are kind of important. So, well, let's talk about real quick before we wrap up. Well, what would you tell people who are, so let me tell you what your channel reminds me of, if I may be so bold. You remind me of, actually, I have a neighbor down the street he's 4th generation farmer. Your personalities in some ways are vastly different, but he's the guy I call when I hit a snag, and it doesn't matter about what. If it has anything to do with homesteading, he's the guy that I pick up the phone and go, "Hey, my tractor's not starting. What do I do? Hey, my pigs, how do I castrate my pigs? What do I feed my birds?" That's what you remind me of. You're obviously a subject matter expert, but you have that same type of almost approachability where it feels like I could just pick up the phone and be like, "Hey, Billy, my chicken tractor, it's more like a chicken, you know, Yugo. How do I fix this?" You know, that kind of thing. What would you tell people who are just starting out and trying to get their channel going, well, yeah, we'll just leave it there. I won't qualify. What would you tell new people that want to get going in this type of thing?
I'm going to try to answer this and not sound a little sour, This is going to be a tough question. There's a lot of, it depends on what kind of YouTube channel you want. For us, it's all about showing you how it's done. We can add a little entertainment in there. Fine, that's wonderful. It makes people want to watch it more. And frankly, it's not watching paint dry. Now, there are tons, and I would dare say most of the Homestead YouTube channels out there are entertainment based, and there's nothing wrong with that. So you want to find out what side of that spectrum you're on, or can you be a fusion of both? You know, I found it very entertaining watching you take scraps out there to make a chicken tractor. It wasn't just, and I told you that the other day because I thought you combined the perfect fusion of entertainment along with how-to. Now we stick almost exclusively to how-to, although there is an entertainment component in there. So once you find out where you are on that, don't pretend, and this is very, very important because I think you will get called out on it. Don't pretend to be a subject matter expert if you aren't. Lay yourself bare. If you don't know anything about this, make it painfully obvious. Don't pretend, because there's going to be somebody out there that's going to call you out on it. Now, I have seen that with a number of channels out there. Also, if you use another person's idea, give full credit to that person for two reasons. Number one, it's the right thing to do. Second of all, it leads them back to the source information instead of relying on what my interpretation of what their information was. So instead of like, okay, for example, I'm planting this tree this way because of A, B, C, and D. Whereas I should say, I'm planting this tree this way because A, I got it from Stefan Sobkowiak. He's the permaculture orchard guy, and here's where you can find him, because you may go back there, see his information, interpret it a different way that benefits not only you, but me and everybody else out there. There's a lot of plagiarism, stealing of ideas in this realm, and I was warned about it when I started, and frankly, I didn't know the full extent of how bad it was. I really did not have an idea, because I've had a number of my ideas that were truly original regarding, regarding, I was very open when we first got into this. Be careful what you tell people in this forum, because there might be some unscrupulous people that will take your idea and run with it. And I'm talking like truly original ideas, like the tethering system that I created for the fencing out here. I am a journeyman electrician, so it's kind of in my wheelhouse to know how to do these things. So that was a problem that needs solved. I even changed the word from a jumper, which an electrician would call, to a tether, which is something that somebody wouldn't call it. That way I knew if somebody took the idea and ran with it, and it happened. There's been other ideas as well. If you have intellectual property, protect it. That was also another reason for creating this YouTube channel, was to protect some of the original intellectual ideas that we had. So people that are getting into this, look, lay yourself bare. Your audience is going to appreciate it if you say, look, I have no idea what I'm doing here. I don't have a clue, but here's where I got my starting point. Here's where I hope to end up. So if you do it, be genuine. You are, when you do these videos, you're gonna realize that the Billy you meet in a conversation on the phone is not necessarily the one you see there, because in this forum, you got to G it up a little bit. Otherwise, the forum itself makes you look more subdued than you really are. You have to play it up a little bit, because the camera, I don't know how it happens. I don't know why. But if I convey this information in a very typical conversational way, it's going to come out like, hey, man, how are you doing today? It doesn't work. So you have to kick it up.
You're so true. It's almost inexplicable, because so when you and I are having a conversation, in this forum, and I've noticed this with other people I've interviewed too, it looks almost exactly the same as their channel. And not because you're putting anything on, but because you're actually interacting with a human being. So the gestures are there, the response is there. Your response to what I say is here. My response to what you say is here, which doesn't exist with a camera. So when you remove half the equation of the conversation, everything just goes bland, tan, khaki, whatever you want to call it. So there's finding that balance between, I don't want to flail my arms around and strangle chickens on the channel so people will watch, but when you convey information, there has to be some animation to yourself, and it's deliberately like to be unintentional about it, like to make it not look like you're, hey everybody, welcome to what we're doing here, it's Billy with Permaculture, the radio voice type thing, because people smell that a mile away. But you don't want to be, hey, it's Billy from Permaculture. So there's finding that like you said, that balance. And I think when you have a conversation with somebody, it's a bit different, because it's not, when you're talking to somebody on YouTube into the camera, you've thought about everything you're going to say, you've tried to rehearse it, you're trying to make sure it makes sense. When you're having a conversation with a person, you have that spontaneity and that ability, and that even just that makes it seem like a different person. So I think that's great. So where can people
also to
go ahead?
Just briefly, I think it helps also because it's an odd thing to talk into a inanimate device, like you said. Honestly, pretend that device is a person that you care about. Pretend that because really that's what you're conveying out there. So if you're wanting to get off and doing this, you're going to be like a pig on roller skates for a little while. There's no getting around that. And then you get better the more you do it, just like anything. You're going to get better at it. But yeah, you got to find that you got to kick it up a little bit. Otherwise, you're like watching. I don't care how good your information is.
Right.
If you can't demonstrate a little bit of excitement doing it, then it's not going to translate well. Nobody's going to want to watch that. And I'm certainly no expert at this. Like you said, I guess we jumped over 31,000. It seems like we're getting 1,000 a day. I don't know why. But as we grow, I just want to make sure also that I don't lose my integrity along the way. YouTube doesn't pay a whole lot, despite what people think. It doesn't pay a whole lot, but I want to make sure. But I got people, advertisers in different ways, wanting to hit me up about, hey, we'll pay you to advertise this. And to all of them, I said no. I've only ever endorsed one product, and that's EMP Shield. Because as an electrician, I know what that product can do, and I know the guarantee. So I've been very careful about that. But I think along the way, as success builds, as more people know about you, I would be really, really careful about losing your integrity along the way, because it's easy to do, especially if it's a struggle to put bread on the table. I think you can lose your soul quite easily in this if you're not careful. So I would add that addendum to it also.
Whenever money starts getting involved, it gets tricky, right? Or trickier. Even that pause in your mind that happens, and anyways, yeah, we could go a long time down that rabbit hole, but once money's involved, it can be harder. So, well, sir, I certainly appreciate your time. Where can people find you and what you're doing?
Sure. You can find us on YouTube at Permapastures Farm. You can find us at our website. That's where we do a lot of business there. Like I said, we only advertise one product on the channel, but by and large, we are champions for our own products because we think they're the best. Instagram, we have a little bit of a thing there. I'll be honest with you. At the end of the day, I'm something of a Luddite. It's all I can do to operate this phone, to make a phone call, or to do this interview. My son and my wife, by and large, handle all the technical aspects of it. I'm just maybe the guy in front of the camera, and I do a few other things out here. I just concentrate on farming and trying to learn and do and spend as much time doing what I love to do, what I think the good Lord put me on this planet to do. And speaking of it, today is one of those days where it just makes me remember that this is the day the Lord hath made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. So Amen. It's been a joy to talk to you. It's been a joy to hang out. It's been a joy to fellowship. It's been a joy to reach out to your subscribers. And I wish all the best to you and yours and all the people watching this, Well,
I thank you very much. And we're going to keep growing as we grow. And I've got several of your videos in my save for later list that I've watched that I pull out when I go. So the pig butchering's one of them. We're going to be doing that here in probably 2 months for the first time. And I'll probably have it on like the big screen with pause and play and pause, and for like the 3 days that it's going to take me to do this first pig. But we certainly appreciate your time. God bless you, sir, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much, brother. You take care.